Park Secondary College. It's wonderful to see you all here. Just like to start with acknowledgement to country. Acknowledge we are the traditional custodians of this land on which we meet here today, the Whadjuk Noongar people of New Zealand. I recognise the strong connection to the land, waterways and community. Not far from here is Gilba. Some might know that as Thompson's Lake. It's a really strong place of spiritual connection among our people on this land. And I want to pay my respects to elders past and present and extend my respects to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait people, Islander people here today. So here we are at the Leading Innovation Network. This is a network born out of providing a space for people in this space, in the innovation space, to connect across sectors, from all the way from early childhood through to tertiary. It strengthens our whole education system when we connect. Matilda Joubert, you may know, who was our previous ACWA president, now living on the East Coast, created this network to get everyone together, and it's been really popular since its inception, and we've kept that going. So it's interesting to see the curiosity sparked and the innovation kind of connections made. Term one, we had one at Bloom UWA, and Lisa Longman, who's one of the directors at Bloom, spoke about AI. Just as a personal kind of story, that sparked my interest and need to know more and learn. And so now Lisa has partnered with an industry expert who's running an AI course for strategic education leaders. So I've been in the first cohort of that, and it's been really exciting to be able to learn and grow as a result of this very network. So it's what you take from it. It's also what you give to it. And so on that note, thank you to the generosity of the people who speak today. It's really important that, to keep these networks going, it relies on people putting themselves forward to speak. So thank you to Joe for hosting and also for speaking today. And we'll also hear from Wayne Rivet from Penrose College, from Professor Karen Mercier from Curtin University, and Kate Johnson and Nick Smith from Catholic Education WA. I'd also like to acknowledge our hardworking ACIL WA executive branch here today, Rachel Lear, our president, Carol Daniels here as well, and we have probably some more online.
Possibly.
So just before we start, we will run through a few speakers. We have some refreshments. It's very relaxed, so if you need to get up and go to the bathroom, they're just around the corner behind the kitchen, and we'll break in the middle there just to have a little bit of networking. So we'll let you know when we're going to pause to our online people. So welcome to those joining us online. We try to extend this invitation out so people in the regions and people who can't escape their school that early or their organisation, they can still join us. So firstly, I'd like to invite Wayne up to speak with you. Thank you.
Thank you. My career pathway started in the department in special education, so I started working at what was then called the Kim Beazley School in Fremantle, and then Malibu School down in Rockingham, working in schools for kids with disabilities, which led me to work at the Independent Schools Association as a consultant around wellbeing and inclusive education, and then to the Andrew Rowell Centre, which is a school based at Warwick Cairns. So I had a strong interest in pastoral care. And then through circumstance, I ended up at Christchurch Grammar School, which is an all-boys school. I was head of pastoral care there in the prep school. And then to John Wollaston School out in Armidale, co-ed low-fee Anglican School, and now at Penrose College. And this is going to be a little snapshot of a presentation we have coming up in Philadelphia in a few weeks. There's a coalition of girls' schools around the globe. And one thing we've been working really hard on in the last 5 years at Penrose College is a culture around raising strong women. The background to that was when I started at Penrose College, after working in boys' schools and co-ed schools, I was mystified by how quiet it was and how traditional it was. So I think it was very tempting with girls to have them sitting in rows and writing really neatly and learning by rote and celebrating the success of those girls. But I guess from my point of view, that's not really what education is all about. So we wanted to actually look at a more authentic way of delivering pedagogy to girls and not focusing and not celebrating how easy it is to teach young girls, particularly those girls from coming from pretty much a high socioeconomic background. And as you all know, with measures like NAPLAN, for example, and from my point of view, NAPLAN has been a failure over the last 10 or 15 years because results have plateaued. And schools like ours tend to do well at NAPLAN because the greatest predictor of NAPLAN is socioeconomic status of the family and whether parents have a tertiary education or not. So of course we're going to do well at NAPLAN, but that really wasn't the point. So we wanted to look at how we raise girls who are authentically good. During COVID, there was an online professional learning that I tapped into by a psychologist from the States called Rachel Simmons. And she wrote an amazing book called The Curse of the Good Girl. So I grabbed a copy of that book. And her book was all around, I guess, warning signs around traditionally has been this concept of the good girl. And this is a good girl who will sit quietly, do what she's told, is compliant, people pleaser, always there to help out, gets good grades, and so on. And her kind of warning around that was that compliance leaves you vulnerable to abuse. So we all have a strong kind of interest in protective behaviours now. We all have curriculum based around that. And I'm starting to see the link there between the stereotype of a good girl and vulnerability to abuse. You kind of tend to do what you're told and you want to please people. So we wanted to look at our pedagogy from 3-year-olds all the way through to year 6 and across then the whole college, which I'll talk about around creating space for positive rebels. When it came to our strategic planning, we developed a whole new strategic plan around this. There were some people in our school community who didn't like the term positive rebels, for example, because they wanted their girls, their daughters to be good. So that took a little bit of kind of massaging to understand that being a positive rebel is a good thing. Interestingly, when we workshop this with our students, and we're really much into student agency, the older students, so secondary students, didn't much like that, but our younger students, particularly year 3 to 6 students, have a really strong drive to be a positive rebel, do things for the environment, are very big on reconciliation, and all the things we wanted to weave into our strategic plan. So we had a really good look at that. We learned a lot more about from Rachel Simmons and others around, I guess, this concept of psychological ceiling for girls, delved a little bit deeper, and we started to change our culture. And this is whole school, so we started to look at what breeds success in life. And you're probably aware of the fact that when you think of people you'll know or people you go to school with, it's not IQ that really matters as much as EQ. It's those social skills, the grit, the determination, and so on. So we've got people like Rachel Simmons we're learning from, and of course Carol Dweck and Angela Duckworth around grit and so on. So lots of strong women, but pretty clear messages around what we need to do in education, which is really relevant to us as a girls' school. So success in life, not just sitting and being compliant and learning by rote. We also then tapped into the research by the Commissioner for Children in WA around 2020, 2021. We were part of that, I'm sure some of you might have been as well, looking at the WA data around girls. And that was really, really clear around the way girls were internalising issues, the high incidence of eating disorders, anxiety, depression, self-harm, and so on, which is a part of any school. And that's where for a school like Penrose, those issues are still front and centre as they are in your schools, particularly with girls. And from my experience, girls in the junior school years, you don't tend to see issues, you tend to see people pleasers. As girls become young women into adolescence, problems start to come out, like, for example, eating disorders and self-harm and the like, which you can't really see so much, they're kind of masked a little bit in the early years. So we started to look at what we need to do to enable our girls to express their emotions more and externalise rather than internalise. We wanted to speak up around the fact that, as we're all aware, we're not focusing so much on ATAR scores. Penrose has a really good track record for ATAR, but thank God we're all getting better at this, and so we're not publicising our ATAR scores anymore as schools. Because it was a little bit rigged, wasn't it, around how some schools were encouraging strongly some students not to sit ATAR, so as not to kind of lower their scores, and that happens a little bit in NAPLAN as well. We wanted something a little bit more authentic than just to focus on pure academic outcomes, and you can see there what we wanted to focus on. So we started a new strategic review. We involved students as young as 3 and 4 in that review around getting their feedback of what they wanted from their school, right up through to year 12. We flipped our early learning centre from more of a kind of traditional academic model. I'm talking about kids in rows in pre-primary, doing lots of worksheets and learning by rote, to a more play-based model. Early learning pedagogy, I know some of you may not be early learning people, but early learning pedagogy is brilliant in terms of the whole child. And in fact, the early years learning framework is a great model for everyone right up to year 12, around those concepts of being, belonging, becoming. It's just a great roadmap for life. So we've got a lot to learn from our early childhood educators, I think. And despite the fact I had people saying to me, you'll lose enrolments if you go down this path, we actually have nearly doubled our enrolments, because as I was saying to someone earlier, the young parents that are coming in, and I'm getting old now, so you know how when you think you're the same age as your parents and the kids you're teaching, and then you realise you're another generation, you're like the grandparent, not the parent. It's a little bit humbling. But now when I talk to the young parents, and they are young, these are parents of 3 and 4-year-olds, they're pretty savvy now. They actually know what they want. And through people like Maggie Dent and a whole range of others, they do their research. And culturally, there's a little bit of a slightly racial cultural stereotype is that Chinese families want just academics. Well, no. We've got a lot of Mandarin speakers at our school. A lot of the families coming in do their research. They don't want just pure academics. They want that whole child focus as well. So we've had quite a good response in terms of enrolments. Around the theme of strong women, I think, we created a new motto that one of our Year 2 students wanted to have, which is Love Grows Here. So very much around being caring and loving as a school. I'm not afraid to talk about the concept of love in the school. That's really important. And then we wanted to talk about that sense of resilience. So as a whole school, we came up with a new strategic plan. Interestingly, when we workshop this for a year or two with a whole range of focus groups. The focus didn't come up on learning. The focus was on these sort of qualities here. And at first we thought these sound a little bit too kind of basic, like just having fun. Surely that's not part of the strategic plan. But that's been one of our most kind of overwhelmingly kind of positive responses from our families, that they do want their kids to have fun. That we do want our girls to make their own adventure and honour their agency. We don't want ceilings, of course. And we want our kids, the end goal is to go out and have our kids go and make a difference in the world, a positive difference in the world. What keeps us all going, really, is what keeps me going anyway. To think that these kids are going to change the world for better. And there's some pretty crappy things happening around the world at the moment. We've got to hope and pray that the kids we're kind of raising through school are going to make a difference. So in terms of our whole kind of strategic plan, we've got we had created a series of pillars, and again, the embrace, create, solve, blaze, and impact were not necessarily focused on learning. Blaze was about positive rebels and girls kind of blazing their way. The SOAR was based on staff. We wanted to kind of focus more on staff and their own kind of career pathways and well-being. Embrace was around our whole school community, and impact was around being more innovative around what we do. And of course, right down the bottom there's that the students are at the centre of everything we do. So from our point of view, it's that focus on strong young women. It's getting away from that traditional sense of, I guess, that girls' school and the stereotype around that, and focusing on raising real young women to go out and be a force of good in the world. So that's a snapshot of what we're going to talk a little bit more about in Philadelphia and other places. We're all quite committed to this. We had a whole change in leadership in the college over the last 5 years. So new principal coming in, new head of junior school, new deputy head of junior school, new leadership team, and this is what we've come up with. So we decided to keep this going for another couple of years. We kept our strategic plan to 3 years because the world's changing so quickly. We didn't know 5 years seemed like a long way out, but we're going to keep going with this because it's resonated really well. So that's it from me. Just a little snapshot there of what we're doing at Hammond.
That's amazing.
Thanks, Wayne. Really, really interesting to see how that's evolving at your school, and love to see how where it goes next.
Yep.
Yeah. So next, I think we have Karen. Is that right?
Yes.
On the,
I think the, yeah, if you just click it. Yeah,
yes.
there we go.
Welcome, Professor Karen Lucia, to speak with you. Thank you.
Wayne, I sat there absolutely intrigued with what you were saying. I'm very proudly an alumni from Penrose College, a student of the 70s and coming out in 82. And I thought, am I a good girl? Actually, Wayne, I'm going to have to say no, I think I'm one of your positive brothers. So a very proud alumni, and my two daughters went there as well. So this notion of being good girls, or rather the rebel that's out to make change. And so in some ways that speaks really nicely to where I'm positioned in the work that I do now and have done over a career of, I hate to say this because it ages me, and yes, I'm a grandmother, of over 35 years in education. So this notion of brave leadership for bold innovation. So not being a good girl and being a bit of a rebel, I came out in the 80s and went into a science degree. And when I got to university, I actually looked around and I went, where are all the girls? So I was actually one of the shifts, I guess, taking girls into science and a part of that movement. So I have always had this desire for scientific literacy, science for citizenship, and how that's translated in current times in terms of STEM. So very much focused on STEM innovation. And it takes a little bit of bold action, as many of you probably can relate to. I'm really fortunate to have been part of a team of 17 academics nationally who were awarded through the federal government, the Australian Research Council, a Centre of Excellence for the Digital Child. I always actually get a little bit goosebumpy when I say this. We were awarded $34.8 million from the federal government, which was matched by industry and topped up by the 5 universities. So we come in with a budget of just under $100 million for a program of research over 7 years. So that achievement, and to be a part of that team that were awarded that money, also came with a huge amount of responsibility. So my talk with you today is really about taking on a bit of a short journey. It's a personal story. It's about how I led the design and establishment of an innovative STEM education, living social lab on that curtain as part of the ARC Centre of Excellence for the Digital Child. So my story reflects a lot of the things that Wayne talked about: vision, grit, values, true belief. So it's a story, I think, about how we took what was a bold idea and we turned it into something that was tangible, it was living, and really a breathing space for young children, educators, and researchers. It's a space on the campus now that's called the Children's Technology Code. And as I said, it's on our Curtin Bentley campus. So I'm going to share with you some of my reflections and key leadership learnings from this experience. So this is actually what the Children's Technology Code looks like. So to begin, there was no such thing and not even an idea, let alone a place, for the Children's Technology Code in any strategic plans or planning documents. It purely started with a strong belief, a belief that young children not only can engage meaningfully with digital technologies, but that they should. And early childhood education needs its own place in the innovation and STEM conversation, not at the fringes, but at the very centre and the foundation of STEM education and innovation. So from that belief, and it was a strong belief, very healthily bound within values, that a series of actions took place. And from those actions, we created this innovative space and learning ecosystem. So the cove, as you can see here, was actually built and designed to mirror a typical early childhood learning space. However, it's flexible. Everything that you see in that room moves in and out. And it blends the digital elements with traditional resources that provoke and foster play-based experience. It's a place and a space for connecting, co-designing and facilitating learning. And in these photos, you can actually see one of our practitioner researchers who now actually heads up our early years education program at Curtin and is about to complete her PhD. She's actually facilitating with children, kindergarten children in Northern. So the interactive board was creating like a portal for communication. Now this is just a snapshot of the action in that room, but we actually had children on either side in Northern and on our campus at Curtin that were connecting and communicating across this digital portal, and the quality of the pedagogy and the facilitation that helped enable that. You'll also see that we have an early childhood educator there who is observing the role modelling and themselves building their own digital literacy as they're engaging with the children in space. So it is a place where we bring social interactions and we bring community and teachers and parents and children into the space. And we also, with an underpinning role for research. So the CTC, we abbreviate it to CTC, is fitted with high resolution cameras so that we can collect research data from what's activities that are conducted in the space. So we are really looking to have evidence-based innovation that is bringing about transformation to digital practices in early childhood and the way in which we connect with community parents. So the reason for the cameras and to go that deep into the system is that we're actually looking to see the impact of digitisation on childhood. So it's not just the, technical skills, it's also how technology is used for learning and a way that actually promotes their social engagement and well-being. So that's a level of resolution. We can actually zoom in and see the expressions on the children's faces and also that of the parents and teachers who join in the space. So when I reflect on what I learnt in bringing this together, because there's nothing like this in Perth, and in fact there are other there are other social living labs, but they don't look like this. So what I learnt from this is that it was important to stay anchored to the vision and to be prepared to speak boldly about it. I had to share that vision if I was going to make it a reality. So I think learning from this is that vision is the seed. And I'm sure with your schools and your systems, you'd know that education is a very busy enterprise and place. So it can at times feel like we are planting seeds in concrete. I had to learn to articulate the idea of the Children's Technology Cove in ways that connected across disciplines. I wasn't just talking educator to educator. I had to be able to talk across disciplines, across sectors, and across the Curtin institution and structures. Now, I know Kim's going to know exactly what I'm referring to there. Universities can be quite complex places to function within. And so I had to communicate this vision for early childhood education and the importance of positive digital childhoods to people that only cared about finance and the bottom line of student enrolments. To be blunt, house rules here. So as you can see from these photos, that it was very much about bringing people into the space to literally share the vision and supporting them to also be part of the co-design and the play and the playful learning with children in positive and constructive and creative ways with digital technologies. So to achieve this vision, it meant that I had to pitch. And literally we were shortlisted for an Innovations Award, so I did have to pitch. Yeah, learned stuff from that, but that's a story for another day. So I had to pitch to university leadership, not just about the physicality of the space, but about the potential and the impact that we desired. I had to speak with early childhood educators about potential, but not with any pressure. I had to find my allies, even if they didn't sit in the same room or in the same sector even. So I think if you have a vision, the key learning for me here is to speak it, and speak it out loud, and speak it often, and finding the language and the way of communicating that helps others to see that too. So in this space, as a social living lab, we invited parents and family members to join their children to stay and play in the Children's Technology Code. We encourage parents and educators to stay and literally play with their children. I'm so cold because of the fan. It's actually making my nose run.
I should turn them off, but they're behind the screen, so they've just done a great job.
My nose. I'll find some. Sorry, that's terrible, isn't it? I'll just keep going, just if I'm at it. But apologies for that. Yeah, so we're inviting in the parents, and we just very affectionately we refer to these programs as stay and play. You know, you stay with the children, you co-play, and you experience and you learn. So we have this outreach and impact with educators, but also with the parents and community. So we affectionately say you stay and you play, you don't drop and run. So we're not providing holiday programs or creation. It's literally it's a learning experience, and it's co-play and so on. So the idea here is to hold fast to your values, because they become your compass that help you stay on track. And when you're in points of challenge or uncertainty, it's your values that will keep you focused and directed. They become your compass for action. So the work isn't just about what we do, it's also about how we do it and why we do it. We hold firm to the value that children are capable thinkers, and that equity of access to digital technologies and STEM experiences is for us, thank you so much, Joe, for us, thank you, is actually non-negotiable. Apologies, is actually non-negotiable. And that value shaped everything, from who we invited into the space to the way we designed it, and to how we co-construct learning with children, families, and in-service and the pre-service teachers as well. So I think over time, my learning in this space, but also those STEM innovations preceding it, is that it's rarely, in fact, I'm going to say never, straightforward. We get pulled in multiple directions, and that's why your values really matter. This is what keeps us grounded when things get hard, and as you know, it does get hard. It gets hard in the simple things, even in terms of event management, but importantly, about how we maintain connections and we communicate vision and mission to our stakeholders and communities.
That didn't click. Maybe just try it again. If you pointed at the
It's
actual...
right. I'm just actually just doing
you're
a
still...
check. I just got lost for a minute there. Sorry about that. So what I wanted to say about this one, sorry, I just lost my space for a moment. About in what we're seeing here is we actually brought in the children and their family members. So this is actually Jacob, and he's here with his auntie. So the importance and reflecting on this, it's really important to see the children as capable thinkers, and that they can share their experiences, and we get this double-pronged educated process. When the parents and the educators and the family members stay and play with their children, we're impacting on the children's digital literacies, but at the same time, we're providing professional learning and development for educators, but that outreach and important capacity building within families and communities. So here we see another one of our practitioner researchers talking to children about Siri. And she asks the question, Siri, are you my friend? Have you ever tried to do this? You know what Siri does?
I'm sorry, but
Siri's about to tell you.
Siri will tell you. Siri actually replies, yes, I am your friend. So in terms of children's vulnerability and digital literacies and citizenship that's needed, we see that AI, as challenging as that might be in a high school or a university context, it's also presenting as challenge within early childhood and for young children in their families and homes. So with this becomes the key message and learning of we have to be brave. We have to champion the cause even when it's not popular and it can be uncomfortable. Fancy raising with an early childhood community who are opposing and putting barriers in place for digitisation and digital technologies to say we've already moved one step beyond that. We now have AI impacting and influencing and infiltrating into young children's everyday lives. So changing minds is actually one of the hardest parts of innovation. Early childhood education is still grappling with outdated beliefs about the role of technology. They're too young, it's too risky, and it's unnatural. These myths persist in homes, in policy, and even amongst some of our most quality and well-meaning early childhood educators. But the reality is digital technologies are already a part of children's world. So the question isn't should they be, the question is how do we ensure their experiences are rich, ethical and meaningful. So being a champion and a champion of STEM innovation means calling out these sort of things, but gently, but clearly. It means hosting conversations that challenge assumptions, designing spaces where new possibilities become visible, and leading from a place of respect for children, families, and the education profession and teachers. So at the Cove, we don't just put tablets, screens in front of children, we create collaborative projects, bringing research and families together in dialogue and connecting with theory to hands-on experience. So that's how change starts, very much about not replicating what's safe, about being prepared to be brave and to push boundaries, and inviting people in to share in something that is new and compelling. So some of the things that have helped when I thought about this is how you actually take something like this that's a bit of an out there idea and create it into an impactful learning space. We've just in the last week hosted Catholic Education and a group of their kindergarten teachers who are coming and drawing from schools right across Western Australia. So it is about coalition building, bringing on people and finding the people who care. Now you can find these people in unexpected places. We've found librarians that have come in from the Northern Territory. We've had librarians come in from the State Library. Even our IT staff at Curtin, and what they've done for us and been prepared to donate to us, because we actually say unashamedly, it's for the children. Local councils as well. So I think the key thing here is if we're truly leading for innovation in STEM or any innovation, we don't lead alone. So we also took an iterative design process. We didn't wait to be perfect. We prototyped and we learned by doing. We also saw the value of storytelling and communicating what we were doing. So we did. We told the stories. We told it in multiple modes. So we told it in photos, quotes, children's voices, and we really worked hard to make what can feel very abstract, real and tangible experiences. So there was also a spirit of reciprocity here. We weren't doing research on children. We were providing and researching and learning with children. So putting the children and their voices at the central place. So that was a very important positioning for us. So you all come from different sort of elements within education. I come from the tertiary sector and from a research base. I know there are school principals here, but those of you who are talking about strategy and policy. I think the same thing sits across for all of us. It's the vision that really matters when we're talking about innovation. Your values matter and your courage matters. The children educators today, tomorrow, they're actually depending on us to imagine and build and to defend that vision. So the challenge that I put out to my researchers and my early career people working with me in the team and I hope you share this idea. Let's be bold, let's be values-led, and let's lead, not just manage, because the future of STEM innovation for our
Thanks everyone. Welcome back online. I'm just going to now introduce Kate Johnson and Nick Smith from Catholic Education. Thank you.
Thank you.
Afternoon, everyone, or nearly evening. Look, I'm just going to speak just for a couple of minutes in case told me I won't go too long. But I just want to give a little bit of context around a piece of work that we've been doing and leveraging some of the work that we've been doing in the data space for a fair amount of time now. I suppose I also want to just start with a little bit of context. So we've got 162 schools, or 162 schools that we work with, around about 13,000 staff and in that space, and around about, well, you can see that the dimensions of where our schools are. So what I suppose when you think about what Kate shares a little bit later, one of the big drivers for that work is equity and ensuring that what's available for schools, or one school, is available for all schools. Okay, so it doesn't matter whether you're up in the Broome region in Nullagh school, or you're down south in Esperance, or you're a high Ixia school in the metro region. We want to provide something that's available to you, to all teachers. We've got a pretty clear vision, as mentioned earlier in another presentation. We work on an insight-centred, child-focused vision. Okay, and so we truly believe in child-focused pedagogy and starting with the child. Okay, and that sort of lends itself through to the work that Kate will talk to. In the vision for learning, really speaks to the words of ensuring that we want our students to ensure that they have strong academic skills. We think that's important for all students, but we want them to be able to demonstrate the dispositions of collaboration, create, innovate, appreciate, and think critically. Okay, so we have kind of this idea that if we input this, and this is our vision, and we have quality Catholic learning and teaching and strong learning cultures and communities, what we're working towards is strong academic skills, learner agency, and lifelong capabilities for learning. So today's presentation will centre probably a little bit around this part today, but don't think this is all we believe in, if that makes sense. We really want to, we still work with a big framework in capabilities for learning, but ensuring that within that, we know it's not a dichotomy. You know, we want to share that it's important for all of these things and these aspects for all students. So the guiding principles, I'm not going to talk too much because we are going to talk about data, but I suppose it just gives you a flavour of where we start before we do sort of any innovative work in this space. Okay. So I'll hand over to Kate and she'll talk to you a little bit about the project.
So just leading on from Nick, I suppose our innovative project is Learning Insights Plus. And what Learning Insights Plus is, it is a platform, a resource that identifies data insights and suggests AI-generated learning experiences to meet the needs of our students. So where does this fit in with our vision? As a system, we support our schools and our teachers to use multiple sources of data. Leaning into what Nick said, we acknowledge that academic data is just one source, and we do focus on this in this project. But we also have two other platforms that all our schools have access to, Learning Insights and Student Learning Journey. Learning Insights have all our standardised data that schools can then drill down to, looking at their school, cohort, and then role group of where they are against the comparators. And we also have a Student Learning Journey, which I always say as a primary school teacher, it's that old box that you used to hand up to the next teacher each year with all the assessments that the students have, the SEAL or common assessments that the students have completed. So really giving that snapshot across from that K to 12. So that's Student Learning Journey. And we've rolled out and we've done a lot of pre-work in this space, especially in regards to data literacy. And moving into that data storytelling with our schools and with our teachers. It's something that's been continuing and moving on for the last 6 years, in which when we moved from our database, our data storage being on a third party, to building our platforms in-house. So what we endeavoured to create came from feedback from our teachers. They say Learning Insights great, student learning journey is great, but what about my kids right now in front of me? We love the NAPLAN item analysis, but by the time we get to look at it and clicked on all the links, I still don't quite get what I should now be doing in my teaching to move my students along. So really leaning into those actions of identifying where my students are at and now what are my actions moving forward. So this platform endeavoured to do so in its proof of concept, support the data-informed decision making. It provided links directly to the WA curriculum, and it offered pedagogical approaches aligned with our CEWA vision for learning. And we also, one of its key purposes was to reduce teacher workload. So I'll talk you through it. Doesn't look too fancy, but it is built in Power BI. It's a proof of concept, and we acknowledge it's not the best platform, but it's the proof of the idea. Well, is this useful for teachers, and will you use it? So they can filter through their academic year and then further down to their role groups. And what is identified is, according to their content descriptors, the students, more than 50% of students have answered, and that area of weakness for their current curriculum year. So we're not looking at gaps at the moment, we're not looking forward. For my current curriculum year as a teacher, from the previous assessment, where are my students at? They can then select on it and they are able to then see the student data insights, so the student groupings. So according to these responses, where are my students categorised? So giving me a spread, a little insight, even just there, of where can I be taking, where can I be differentiating my curriculum. It's then when we lent into generative AI and used it to create the lesson, or use the prompting and the guardrails around our Vision for Learning and SCASA resources to identify different pedagogies. So these are the learning experiences that teachers can then access. They can then contextualise, they can go in and copy certain sections and then differentiate it to suit the students in their context. So that's from the lens of what is the area of week, or that I need area of focus. The other lens is looking at, and it's also directly linked to the SCASA exemplars, which one of our biggest wins was so many teachers going, oh, I never knew these existed. And these are such valuable resources that they now have access to behind through linking in. So another way is using the tool of term 2, I'm planning for chance statistics and probability. Let me look at that specific curriculum content. Where are my students distributed according to the standardized assessments at that point in time? Really important. It's not an everyday resource, but it's at that point in time, giving them a little bit of an idea of the according to their data, and then a suggested learning experience that may kick off. How can I then teach this? We also have links built in, which go to outside resources that the educators can then use. So that was our second iteration of the proof of concept. And what we found, what we really lent into with this tool is we know that there are lots of ed tech companies that will come in and be like, come and use this. Come, we can do this easy for you. And as we dive deeper into it, and looking more and more, because we know AI is such a fast moving area, especially in education, we really made sure that we lent into the Australian Artificial Intelligence Framework and our own CEWA Artificial Intelligence Framework. And that the learning experience generated by the tool was not to replace teachers, but to supplement what they were already doing and their professional judgment and their expertise in the classroom. One of our biggest things is data security. We're dealing with students here. Behind the number is a student, respecting the integrity of the child, and we know that they're more than a number. So ensuring that our data wasn't going to a third party, that it not only aligned to the artificial intelligence framework, but also the resources and everything provided was copyrighted and met all those restrictions and settings. In the development process, this was something quite new to CEWA, and I'll look to Pete. Normally SEWA has a big launch of a new project and it's like, this is amazing, come use it. Whereas we rolled out our process and we really let into the triple helix innovation. We worked really closely with the analytics team, the teaching and learning team, and schools and educators. And we also worked closely with Monash University, looking into research. And we released a tool to the for year 3 to year 6 for feedback. And we actually said, this is not perfect. We want your feedback. Will you actually use this tool? Because if not, we won't put our energies there. We want to really meet you where you are at in the classroom. So that was a real process. Particularly, we were able to get 8 schools on board. Or we actually had 58 schools expression of interest of 160, 58 primary schools. We had 8 schools who we worked with teachers from year 3 and year 5 who 2-week cycle where they met with us and the data engineers all online on a call because it was across the state. And the teachers would be like, I don't like this. Why are you doing this? I don't trust the data. So we got on the ground live feedback and we're really able to work in a fast, iterative process to then release a trial of the proof of concept to all our primary schools. So we've now got our feedback and we're moving into our stage 2 of the pilot. So that is going to be looking at the triangulation of data. So we've got PAT and NAPLAN data. What the teachers really identified was it would be great if we could bring in summative data as well as our formative data that's happening in the classroom. And that's something we would like to do, but there's a lot more things to unpack with that. But first and foremost, we're going to look at bringing in 2 data sets and working how to align them so that it's not just linked to curriculum content, but it's also linked to the item difficulty. So if you're familiar with NAPLAN, it's also that item difficulty. And with PAT, that really plays a part in identifying where a student's at in their learning. A lot of our teachers and a lot of the feedback was we'd love end-to-end resources. And although we acknowledge that and we are looking into providing more resources such as PowerPoints and quizzes, it's also something that as T&L with our schools we're going to unpack because it's not just about a teacher. It's not about disempowering a teacher. They have this knowledge. They don't need to just be pulling out particular resources, but giving them something that they can contextualise and use in their classroom. We got really positive feedback on the innovative approach, especially with different things over the many years. Some teachers were like, oh, this is great. You guys are actually listening to us. And also one of our big learnings that we've taken away is in that Triple Helix innovation model is upskilling our data analytics in education data and in actually the way we teach, and that the way a teacher looks at their data isn't the be all or end all. There's so many things in observational and anecdotal notes that they are taking that actually forms the next step. So we worked really hard with our analytics team. We had one of our data engineers full trained who would then go and read all these books on explicit teaching and inquiry learning so we could really work those into the prompts. So they were our key learnings and we're looking forward to our next iteration to find out if this will have some impact on our teachers, on our students' learning. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick and Kate. That is fascinating. It's wonderful to see a sector taking the lead and looking how to harness this technology, because I've learnt anything from my couple of days so far with Bloom is that most of us are not ready. It's already here. It's the fastest growing product in human history. The amount of users in 2 years is far beyond what anyone expected 8 years for the iPhone to make the sort of growth that AI has in 2. So really exciting work. So thank you for sharing with us today. Finally, we have our host, Jo Willesee, who's going to share her perspectives on a new school. Thank you, Jo.
Thank you. I'm going to say Tamara is persistent because she asked me to do this last term and I said no, and then she asked again. So I do feel a little bit fraudulent stepping up here on a theme of innovation when I'm actually speaking about organisational culture. And so it might not fit the true definition of innovation, but I definitely think it's something that's lacking in educational organisations. I think businesses do organisational culture better than education does. I've chosen not to do a PowerPoint because I never stick to them. So let's see where this goes. I'm a drama teacher, so I'm going to tell you a story. I'm not going to quite do that. But just to share a little bit about myself, I'm a foundation principal here at the college. I've been doing this for the last 7 years. So in 2019, I had the fortunate space to have 12 months to plan the college. And I've got 2 fellow foundation staff members, not my staff members, but opening and doing the journey. So that was really lovely. Bit of a diverse background in education. Started as a drama teacher, and that's when I interacted with Kim in those days. I've done learning support, pastoral care, and then into curriculum and deputy roles. I thought in 2018 it would be a really good idea to apply to be a first-time principal opening a school. And that's been one hell of a learning journey, to say the least. So we opened Hammond Park in 2020. So that year might be a little bit familiar with you, because not only does it come with foundation, it comes with the word COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And we had barely known our families, our cohort, or even our staff when we were dealing with the beginning challenges of COVID. So one of the aspects in my little spiel today is about agility, leadership agility, and I think COVID taught us that. So we opened, but in 2019, the luxury of time to actually spend time thinking about the type of school I wanted to create and then lead. And it's the one, and I do call it a luxury because in education we don't have time, and every day is different. So I actually got to really think about what I wanted in that aspect. And I kept coming back to culture. And what does culture mean, and what does it look like? And most of what I'm going to talk about today is focusing on staff, because if we get it right with the staff, that impacts our young people, and it's all about their journey. So I kept looking at what culture meant, and I realised as an educator, no part of our training deals with really looking at organisational culture, and dare I say, even leadership training in terms of my experience in the early days. I've done a lot of that myself, sought that. So I started to look at how we might focus on the private enterprise, and I did a lot of reading. I'm regularly called a nerd from my family, and so I started reading and doing a lot of research, and I share a bit of my readings on social media. So I really started to get into that, and we were able to sort of look at what I wanted, and I had to share that vision with the community because I was advertising for staff and I was attracting families. So whilst I had a concept of what I wanted to do, we actually co-created the vision and values of the college and every single thing. I mean, it's amazing to look around now 7 years down the track and look at what we have. There was nothing in these buildings. So it's been a journey over the last 5 years, and our school has changed dramatically in that time. We have a few extra buildings than what we opened with in 2020, but the most significant change has been our people. When I first opened, I had 165 students. I now have nearly 1,100 students. I went from 9 teachers to 65 teachers. Our leadership, including exec, grew from 7 to my current 17. And I started with about 4 support staff, and I now have 53. So you can imagine when you're leading culture every year, we have to reculturize is terminology that I use with our staff. So our people have changed. Our culture has changed, but has stayed really aligned to the original vision of this being a place where people want to come and work, and they value one another and the workplace, but then they value our young people. And we look at all sorts of measures on the back of data for students. We look at all sorts of measures with, you know, what's your organisational culture, your OHIs, your surveys, your people at work, psychosafety. But one of, I think, a really solid measure for me is that I have most of my foundation staff still. So I've lost 2 to retirement. I had to let them go. And then I have one who is now, she was my music teacher who's now singing on cruise ships. So I really couldn't compete in that space. And an EA that's gone off into youth work. So to be able to keep all of my foundational staff and then grow, I think is a really nice sign of what we've been doing. But how do you articulate culture to people? And I've gone on and I talk very openly with my staff. It's culture by design and not default. And so many people have heard the quote from, I think it's attributed to Peter Drucker, but there's a little bit of conversation about whether it was him, but culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I really do understand that and I do believe it. But culture by design, not default, actually requires strategic thinking and intentional planning to know what culture you want to create. So what have we done at Hammond Park to actually create that culture? And one of the things is a bit of a tagline we use is we talk about recruit hard, manage light. So we do rigorous recruitment processes, multi-stage, and in secondary education, we're one of the early schools that actually started the multi-stage approach because Department of Education has the worst recruitment process in terms of you submit your CV, you write 5 or 6 pages to criteria that people don't really understand. We miss out on amazing people from other sectors because they don't know how to write to this ridiculous process, and in fact, they're looking at changing it, which is great. So we said, right, people don't write well. It doesn't mean they're not the right people. So multi-stage interviews, and we had them working with students. And it's amazing when I saw a teacher come and she turned, we wanted people that liked our kids. We wanted people that wanted to work with one another, and we wanted people who wanted to grow with us. And I remember interviews in the early days where a teacher turned her back on the group task that she was doing to talk directly to me. And I was like, you're not for me instantly, because you want to showcase you and not work with the team here. And then she came in and said, oh, I didn't bother learning the student names. That was, and I was like, so they're the things in our recruitment process that you're able to pick out. Are you the right person for us? So you can teach skills. You can teach instructional practices through coaching and feedback, and we have that. So recruit hard, manage light, multi-stage. Our leadership presentations, they have to understand some element of leadership or self-awareness so that I know they're the right people that I can then grow, coach, mentor. So that's been a huge aspect for us, the recruit hard, manage light. And I've been on 97% of the panels we've had here, including support staff. There was only 2 last year that I actually didn't do for an home ec assistant and a lab tech because I couldn't fit them in. And that is amazing when I do those processes, when people come in and said, the principal's on the panel for an education assistant or a school officer, but our culture starts at the front door. And if I don't have the right person, that's setting the tone. So recruitment's been endless. I'm still recruiting, but it's been worth it. Do we get it right all the time? Nope. I don't know if anyone has the magic trick for that, because there's been a few that have required more management than I anticipated. But I want them to like our kids. I want them to grow with us. I want them to be on board. You talk about, are you on the bus or off the bus? It's more than that, because you can be on the bus and passive. I want you to be engaged, and actually I'll talk about carrying the banner for the college and our kids and living our vision and values. So we have co-created every aspect of this college, from the vision and values, the first strategic plan, the second strategic plan. Every single policy has had voice involved. And almost to the point they're like, oh, here she goes again. And when you recruit staff who fit into the warrior or the D trait of DISC and they just want to get it done, and then you've got the visionary principal who's like, but what about this? What about that? I know I wear people down in that. And I've had active conversations with my associate to say, I can see I'm constraining you, but let's unpack the why. And he's like, we bloody say it all the time, and yet I get it. Because we can be too gung-ho in our busyness to get our tasks done, that we spend a lot of time, I believe, in education, certainly my experience prior to here, undoing the stuff we didn't implement well because we didn't initiate good change management processes. And that impacts culture. If you start this way and then you're changing direction all the time, people aren't on board because they know that you don't know. And so we've co-designed everything. Where am I? I have been really explicit in teaching culture and unpacking what culture means. So we have looked at readings, research, we've looked at YouTube, we've envisaged with Simon Sinek's why, we've done all of that. And I really say to my staff, I don't own the culture, you own the culture. I get to lead it, but I don't own it. And that's twofold. It doesn't all fall to me and it gives accountability there, but it gives them a sense of pride and ownership, which I see coming through in the opportunities they provide our students, because engaged staff don't go above and beyond. And the staff here, I can't ask more of them. In fact, at times I try to pull them back. So we've regularly talked about culture. We've unpacked it. We've talked about how we influence it. We talk about culture killers and culture builders. And we've all been a culture killer at some stage in our careers, and even myself. And even now there'll be times where I have to check myself. And I always want to check myself or be checked by my staff. So we openly discuss that so that we have the psychological safety to say that's not who we are. And I had an example of a new staff member that came mid last year, and we were in the line up here getting some morning tea, and she'd had a bit of an encounter with her rascal, and she spoke very harshly about him. And I've given her a look, and my deputy said, we don't talk about our students like that. Know his story and know who. And so I didn't have to do anything. And she came and apologised, and she said, you actually do stand by what you say you do. And so she's struggling a little bit, because I think some of us have a tendency to fall to kind of the negative at times. And so she's been brought back to sort of say, look for the strengths in our young people, the same as I'm looking for the strengths in you. Coach them like we're coaching you. So yeah, culture by design but not default really requires deliberate discussion, and it wasn't set in 2020. It's not set here now in 2025. We talk about reculturizing, we revisit it every year, and even often at the beginning of each term as a reminder, so that we not only have a shared understanding, but we have a shared language. Leadership agility, I really struggled to sort of articulate what that meant to me, but it's been that constant need to sit in the space for a little while, reflect, refine and adapt and pivot if you have to. And I'm in the midst of a pivot now, growing our student services team, because our college has grown and the student needs are quite strong. And so where I envisaged things 3 years ago when I brought on the second, I'm now changing the model. So the way I change that model is not just me making the decision. I'm meeting one-to-one to hear the voice of my staff. So there's 17 wellbeing people from year co's through to youth workers who are meeting with me one-to-one. And my deputy said, that's a lot of your time. And I said, yeah, but it's going to be more of my time if I don't get it right. So simple PMIs and hearing their ideas, because I'm bringing 2 new people in, what's that going to look like? So those people will impact culture. It'll also impact the team. I think another really important thing that I've seen principals do badly, and I've been on the receiving end, is you talk about professional learning is really important, and this process that we're doing, or this instructional thing is doing, and we've got this presenter, and they set it up and then they leave the room. And that has frustrated me my whole career. So we learn beside them. There's not a PD that has happened in the college that my executive haven't been a part of. I'm in a coaching team visiting classrooms today, giving coaching feedback, and having my staff give me feedback on how I coached that person. So we talk about, lifelong learning gets touted a lot, but we talk about learning, and we talk about walking beside each other with a really strong sense of it's about growth. Catching people in, not catching people out is what we talk a lot about. And staff are more than happy to give me feedback. And have me in their class. That's not their classrooms. That's not often a common thing, or definitely wasn't when we first started in secondaries. We often are very siloed, and we close our doors, and our classrooms are our space. And now here we have a whole school instructional model. We have a whole school behaviour curriculum that we've been rolling out. We co-create our curriculums together. Our classrooms are open and we're in at any time. And I've obviously taught culture a great deal with my staff. And I remember doing a PD a couple of years ago, maybe about 2 years ago, and I actually asked them, how have you influenced culture? And they actually had to do a little reflection. And one of my beautiful D&T teachers came and gave me this a day or so after, which says, how have you influenced culture today? And it sits on my computer, and I've recently done an online chat with Tracy Ezard, and I mentioned it, and she's featured that in one of her little write-ups, because it's a constant reminder, and I can be in my office more than I'd like, so I have to do that. How have I influenced culture with the staff, but also the students? One of the things we do a lot of here is our book studies, and I bought this very ratty old book, and it's probably the reason I bought this, and I've read so many on culture and organisational, different leadership books, but this has been a really simple book to unpack with my leadership team and my aspirant leaders. We're actually revisiting it with a new group of aspirant leaders, and there's 4 core principles about creating a positive culture that Jimmy Cassis talks about, and you can see it's very well loved. It's a bit grotty, and it's about being a champion for all students. And I asked my staff to be a champion for all students, and the example of the staff member I gave was one of those moments. Know their background and champion them. You're not going to like every child, we get that, but you have to be respectful. Expect excellence, and this is a tricky word because we actually put excellence as one of our values. And I remember a really robust conversation with the leadership team who said, but not everyone's going to be academic. And I said, it's not about being academic, it's being the best you can be. And my opening speech to the kids was choose your excellence, because we come from a strength-based approach here, and we ask them to find their strengths so they can choose their excellence, and they can be excellent. And we can expect excellence of them the same as I can expect excellence of my staff. Carry the banner. What we say here should be repeated in the car park and should be repeated in your conversations. And we've talked about how we carry the banner for Hammond Park as a staff when you're having those conversations here, but also outside the school. And being a merchant of hope for our young people, because, gee, it's challenging being a teenager now. We had a little conversation on the side about your, what was your term? Your rebels? Positive rebels. And I said, I've raised one, and you've raised them, and it's great when they're on your side, but boy, when they want to challenge you, that you probably sometimes want to tone that down. But we need to be merchants of hope for them, because it's hard being a young person. And so one of the quotes from the book I always love is, we cannot allow average to become our standard, and that's what we talk about. So thank you.
Thank you, Jo. There's a reason I was persistent.
Yeah.
I think you can gather that from listening to Jo today. I'm really inspired by your leadership. I always have been. And I think we have a lot to learn from each other. And it's amazing to be able to hear from you and your story. And I think your reputation precedes you in the trust that you create with your staff, and the culture by design, not default, is something that we can all take away from, no matter our organisation we work in. So thank you, Joe. So that wraps up our speakers for today. I just want to really thank Joe again for hosting us here today and speaking. Thank you to